Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects in Dungeons & Dragons, multi-classing. For anyone who's watched a lot of my class videos, you've probably noticed in the past that I usually throw in a bunch of build ideas, and some of them usually involve multi-classing. I kind of look at multi-classing as like going to the buffet table, and instead of just having to take one course, you just pick and choose whatever you want, while other players are looking at the player's handbook saying, oh, what do I get next level? You're looking at it saying, what do I want next level? I'm just going to take whatever. However, there are problems with multi-classing as well. For one thing, you're not going to be able to reach the highest level abilities in one class. If you go into something else, you still only have 20 levels to work with. And sometimes you might kind of make mistakes. Let's face it, it's hard to go wrong when you just play 20 levels of one class. But your monk barbarian idea that seems so great in your mind might not work as well on paper once you actually realize that your unarmored defenses from both classes don't stack. So I just want to give you some tips and tricks and some things to watch out for, some do's and some don'ts, and just talk about a little bit about my experiences and things that have worked well for me and things that haven't. So let's just jump right into it. I know a lot of people always say that multi-classing is for power gamers, and don't get me wrong, a lot of power gamers are really into multi-classing, but that doesn't mean you can't be a role player who also multi-classes. In one of my campaigns, the Dungeon Master decided we were all going to start at level 2. He told us that it was going to be a military-style campaign, and all the characters were in some way going to be connected to the army. I decided I wanted to make a fighter warlock. This was before the Hexblade existed. So I decided that my character would be a soldier, and I was going to start with one level of fighter. This would give me proficiency on con saves, would give me a fighting style, and it would give me access to any armor and weapons I wanted. But why go into a warlock? Well, I decided that my character had actually died in his last battle, and then, while dead, in the great black beyond, he hears a voice calling to his name, asking him if he was willing to, just maybe make a certain little bargain. Just don't read the fine print, but I will give you the power to come back to life and to restore peace and order to the land. Yeah, Darth Vader gets it. It's that kind of thing. The point is, though, that you can have a lot of fun role-playing multi-class decisions. Maybe it's just a midlife crisis and your character decides that he doesn't need to be a rogue anymore. Now he wants to be a cleric instead, and maybe, atone for some of the things he's done wrong in his life. Whatever the reason, I think that multi-classing can be just as much for role players as it is for power gamers. There's no reason you can't do it. So here's my 3 main reasons to multi-class, besides role-playing reasons, of course. We're talking mechanics now. Number 1 is to make yourself better at something you already do well. It's basically to enhance your core proficiency. Usually classes will be really good at a couple different things, but other classes might also be good at that same thing. So by combining Class A with Class B, you become kind of like a specialist at that one thing. So let me give you a quick example. One of my earliest videos I made was about the champion fighter, and one of the multi-class build suggestions I gave in that video was 2 levels of barbarian for rage and reckless attack combined with the champion. This is because the champion has an expanded crit range that allows them to crit more often. But the barbarian also gets a lot of crits by attacking with advantage and just rolling twice as many dice. Combined, the numbers are pretty staggering, to be honest. I won't go through the whole breakdown again. I'll probably just link the champion video in the description if anybody cares to check it out. But your crit chance is pretty ridiculous. The second reason is to cover for weaknesses or deficiencies in the class. Deficiencies probably isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. So a good example of this would be like, say, a lore bard who takes 2 levels of warlock. Bards are pretty much great at everything except for damage. They aren't really great damage dealers. And that's not to say you can use all your magical secrets and put all your feats into being a good damage dealer. You can make high damage bards. It's just, it takes a lot more effort on a bard than it will on other classes. But what's often easier is to just take a couple levels of warlock. Now you have Eldritch Blast, Agonizing Blast combo, which, let's face it, that's the core of the warlock damage through most of their career. A spammable cantrip that you can use round after round, fight after fight, and it's available online very, very early. All you need is 2 levels. It keys up your charisma, which is what bards are using anyways. And now it gives bards a good range attack with high damage, and you can even pick up another invocation because you get 2 at level 2. So maybe you went with a human, or maybe you went with a dragonborn bard, and now you don't have dark vision. You can grab Devil's Sight. Maybe you want a bit of crowd control. You can pick Repelling Blast, or even Grasp of Vidar and pull things in closer towards you with your blast. Point is that you can take a class which is really good at a bunch of things, but is kind of weak in one area, and just add this to it. It's actually kind of like the Fighter Warlock I just mentioned. Blade Locks in general have pretty poor armor, pretty poor hit points, but by giving yourself access to heavy armor and a bonus action heal that recharges on a short rest, even if it's self-heal only, then you can start gaining a lot more durability. You can also pick up a fighting style to help yourself to be able to hang with the melee guys a little bit better, and it's only a 1 level investment. You can even go back to Fighter later on and take, like, say, Action Surge or something like that to really help your melee damage even more. The third reason is versatility. Unfortunately though, I find that versatility is the worst of the 3 reasons to multi-class. And it's not that versatility isn't important, it's just that generally, I'm going to give you a general rule right now, and it's that specialization beats generalization, which, as I've just mentioned, is a generalization itself, so there will be exceptions. But overall, you'd rather just be really good at 1 or 2 things than kind of okay at 20 different things. Now, I will give you an exception to that, which is in really small parties. Say, example, you have 2-player group and your partner is going to be playing a wizard. Well, suddenly someone like a Valor Bard starts looking like a really good choice. You have medium armor and shield, which means that you could be kind of an okay tank, but you can also heal, you can buff, you can even help it with crowd control. You can pick up spells from other classes still, you'll get a second attack around. You've got things like Jack of all trades, so that you can do a lot of skills fairly well. You can be a great party face, you can even be kind of the stealthy rogue guy. The problem is that in a 6-player group, nobody needs a guy in half plate and a shield being the tank with D8 hit points, when you could have a fighter or a barbarian or a paladin, or a fighter and a barbarian and a paladin. You could have all of them in a 6-player group. You could have a cleric, so you don't really need a backup healer as much. Not that it's still not useful every now and then, but you could have a dedicated healer who's just going to do the job way better. The point is that in a small group, versatility really shines. In a bigger group, it doesn't shine nowhere near as much, and you'll probably just be happier being really, really good at 1 or 2 things. Now, obviously, there's going to be some trade-offs, and when you multi-class, I already kind of mentioned, but it means you're not going to be able to get to the highest levels of another ability, of the other class. So you will have to make some decisions, and I have to stress that planning things out in advance is the #1 thing you need to do when you're multi-classing. How do you avoid making a lot of mistakes? Well, you just spend an extra 10 minutes looking and say, hey, will this stack with this? Some things just don't stack. Extra attack from different classes doesn't stack. So taking 5 levels of fighter and 5 levels of ranger isn't going to be a great idea. Maybe you could gotten away with 2 or 3 levels, picked up a couple abilities, some spells from the ranger that maybe you wanted to add to your fighter, but going full 5, now you probably just wasted that extra level. So a couple things to watch out for. #1, dead levels. These are levels where you're getting nothing from it. That fighter ranger example I just gave is a perfect example of a dead level. But some levels are, let's just call them mostly dead. For example, let's say you had 5 levels of fighter and then you decided to go paladin. Now, paladin is going to give you access to smites and a lot of other nice stuff, but that's not till level 2. At level 1, you're getting armor, which you already have because you're a fighter. You have access to any armor and weapons. You're getting the weapons, but you already had that too. So what are you really getting from Paladin 1? Well, you're getting Divine Sense, which is an alright ability, but pretty circumstantial. And you're getting Lay Hands. Now, a 5 hit point heal as an action isn't very good. And I know some of you might be saying, yeah, but what if the cleric goes down? I could use Lay Hands to bring the cleric back up again. And that's true. There's always going to be circumstances where you can find a use for it. But it took your action. It's only a 5 hit point heal. And honestly, you could have probably poured a healing potion into the cleric's mouth with your action, and it would have done the same thing. You didn't need to multi-class. Now, one dead level isn't the end of the world. You'll probably be able to survive. It's when you start getting 2 or 3 that you really need to start looking at this build and thinking, maybe there's a more efficient way to do things. Another thing to watch out for is, going back to the versatility angle, trying to do too much and not being able to do any of it very well. It can be really frustrating to play a character for hours and months or even years and just kind of realize, like, he just doesn't really perform the way I wanted. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the most damage or anything like that. I've made characters that were support characters or healers and been disappointed in them because they just didn't really do what I wanted them to do. And that can be a very frustrating thing to put a lot of hours into. Like I said, specialization beats generalization 95% of the time. If you're trying to make a wizard, fighter, rogue, you probably could have just made an Eldritch Knight or an Arcane Trickster, and it probably would have done whatever you were trying to do by multi-classing 3 different classes together and not really being great at any of them. Number 3, trade-offs. I kind of hinted at this already, but even if we look at some simple multi-classes, like say the Champion and Barbarian build that I mentioned earlier, it's easy to realize that if you're taking 2 levels of Barbarian, it means that your Champion fighter is never going to be able to get his 19th and 20th level abilities. Now, if you look at the Champion fighter, at 19 they get an ability score increase or a feat. Well, fighters already have more feats than anyone in the game, so giving up 1 feat isn't the end of the world. You're still going to have more than anyone else in the game, except for the rogue who you're now even with. So that's pretty good. 20th level, you would have had a 4th attack around. That's kind of a bit more of a big deal. But it's easy to say, well, you know, maybe I'd rather have 2 or 3 attacks with advantage for the majority of my career than a 4th attack at level 20. This campaign might not even go to 20. I don't even know if I'm going to be losing out on anything. And it's easy to look at that and say, well, I'm just multi-classing, it's all gain, and I'm not actually losing anything. I'm not even making a trade. But that's actually false, because those 2 levels of Barbarian are also delaying all your fighter progression for the rest of your career. Let's just say, for easy example, you went straight to Fighter 5 to get extra attack, and then decided I might as well go Fighter 6, get another ability score increase, and I can max my strength, for example, or take a feat that I'm really looking forward to. I then decided to go grab 2 levels of Barbarian, and then just go back into Fighter again. So at this point, I have 6 levels of Fighter, 2 levels of Barbarian. I'm going to get my 3rd attack around at level 11. But that's Champion 11. It means I'm going to be level 13. It means that I'm not going to get my expanded crit range to 18, 19, or 20 until character level 17 instead of 15. And it means Survivor is going to be my new capstone, which I'm going to get at 20 now instead of 18. Which, to be frank, it's a pretty good ability, so even as it is, it's better than most capstones, to be honest. But the point is that it's delaying everything, and that's on a fairly simple multi-class. What about, say, a bard who decided to take a bunch of levels in something else? Well, now, not only do you have your bard abilities being slowed down, but all your spell progression is being pushed back. And this leads me to another thing, too, to be very, very aware of. This isn't necessarily a do or a don't, but it's that certain classes synergize very well with multi-classing, and some do not. Also, some classes are going to be better as a primary class, and others it's going to be fine to dip into or whatever. And I should probably define some terms. To me, a dip is when I'm only taking 1 or 2 levels, like maybe 3. But by the time you've got 4 levels of something, I don't consider that a dip anymore. To me, that's an actual multi-class. Because at 4, I'm not going to be able to get my 9th level spells on a pure caster, and you're already starting to get pretty deep into this other class. So it's easy to say like a level 5 ranger, level 15 rogue is mostly rogue, that's true. But to me, that's still a multi-class. You didn't dip ranger, you took 5 levels of ranger. Some campaigns only go to level 5, so it's still a pretty significant investment. So when I say that some are better than others, that's not to say that there's not exceptions to this rule as well. But for example, the wizard class is one that generally doesn't multi-class very well. Now, having said that, I think Diviner 2 and War Wizard 2 both make fine dips for someone to go into. But overall, your 9th level spells on Wizard are very powerful. In fact, Wizards in general have the best spell list in the entire game. I mean, you can argue that Bards could have a good spell list and then just use magical secrets to grab a bunch of the good Wizard spells, and that's true, but those spells are still coming from the Wizard spell list. And the gap in power between 8th and 9th level spells is pretty big. I'd say it's probably bigger than any level in the game, except for maybe the jump between 2nd and 3rd level spells, which is huge, honestly. So, if you're going to multi-class as a wizard, I wouldn't want to go more than 1 or 2 levels of another class. Starting at, like, say, Fighter 1 just to have heavy armor and a shield isn't necessarily a bad investment. I also now have a bonus action heal, and I've got a D10 hit points at level 1, which is way more than the D6 I would have had. Sure, and now I'm only slowing down my progression by 1 spell level per level. But it's still something that's going to be pushing me back to the rest of my career. Going deeper than that can have real problems. But one of the other problems with wizards is that they use intelligence. And nobody else uses intelligence as a main stat. I mean, Eldritch Knights and Arcane Tricksters, you can argue, are also casters who use intelligence, but they're 1/3 casters, not even half casters, and they're both taking spells from the wizard spell list anyways. So while I could definitely see the merit in, say, an Eldritch Knight 11, Wizard 9 build, where you decide, I'm still going to have 3 attacks around, and now I'm going to be able to have 5th level spells instead of 4th, which Eldritch Knight would usually have, and I can take them from any spell school instead of being mostly limited to 2. I think there's some potential there. But in general, you're only getting more of the same type of spells, you're using a stat that nobody else is using, and it's just not going to synergize well with most of the others. On the other hand, look at a class like Warlock. There is a reason I mention Warlock so often in multi-classing. And it's because, number one, they use Charisma, which is shared with Sorcerers, Bards, and Paladins. So lots of other classes are using it as their main stat too. They also have a lot of versatility. You can be a blaster caster, you can be a melee guy. So that gives you a lot of flexibility, meaning that they're going to be able to fit into a lot of different multi-class situations. They're also very front-end loaded. Most classes are going to get their archetype or their path choice or whatever it's going to be called for that class at level 3. A couple like Wizard are at level 2, but I believe off the top of my head, only Warlocks and Clerics choose something at level 1. And a level 1 Warlock, you're already going to be able to choose a patron, which means that something like a Pact of the Fiend or a Hexblade already is giving you a lot of abilities at that level. And Hexblade in particular is going to give you access to medium armor and shields, and the ability to use Charisma instead of Strength or Dex as your attacking stat. Combine this with options of, say, spells like Hex, Armor of Agathis, which are both really nice. You can pick up some damage cantrips like Green Flame Blade, Booming Blade, and of course Eldritch Blast. And then a second level of Warlock will give you invocations. Warlocks offer a very, very wide range of abilities and a lot of power for a very small investment into the class. I actually once read a class guide to Warlocks online where the guy made the joke that I don't even know why I'm writing this because all you need is 2 levels of Warlock and then combined with anything else in the game. And it's kind of true. Other classes that mix very well with some but not with others would include like the Barbarian. Obviously, barbarians can't cast spells while raging, and they can't concentrate on spells while raging. This means they're not going to synergize very well with most casters. Again, there might be niche builds where you take a warlock and a barbarian, you cast Armor of Agathis before the combat, because it doesn't require concentration and it'll last an hour, you rage, the armor now lasts twice as long and does twice the damage. Sure, and I think there might be synergy with the druid as well, actually, now that I think about it, because you could animal shape change, and now those temporary hit points are going to last twice as long when you're raging. Both use a bonus action though, so there could be a problem there. But, you know, give me time, I'll work on that one. I hadn't really given it much thought yet. But the point is that some classes are going to fit well with others, some are not. And again, you can make it work, but it's just going to require a little more effort. On the other hand, the Barbarian is really good combined with martial classes. And Barbarian's another one of these classes where I don't know that I'd multi-class if I was going to go mostly Barbarian. The level 20 Barbarian capstone is one of the best capstones in the entire game, hands down. So while I like the idea of a Champion 18 Barbarian 2, I'm not as thrilled about a Barbarian 17 Fighter Champion 3. I kind of figure you might as well just take the last 3 levels in Barbarian if that's the way you're going to go. So Fighter is another one that has an awful lot to offer with a very low investment. Others like Sorcerer are really good multi-classed because you can grab things like, say, Quicken Casting or other things that could fit into a lot of builds. It's a Charisma caster, but because the Sorcery points are needed to use all your meta magics, it means you're probably going to need a lot of Sorcerer levels. There's a reason why, things like Sorcerer Paladins end up being predominantly Sorcerer with only a handful of Paladin levels. Paladins are kind of like fighters. They're a lot of power with low level investment, but unless you're combining it with a caster class that has spell slots, taking 2 levels of Paladin, just for smites, isn't going to pay off very well because you're only going to have a couple spell slots. Other classes that are going to make a great choice for small dips include things like Rogue and, of course, Bard for Jack of all trades. I've already mentioned the Fighter, of course. Fighter is another one where grabbing 1 level gives you quite a bit. Grabbing 2 levels gives you Action Surge. And getting 3 will give you an Archetype. So pretty much any one of those choices is going to be pretty good. As for the idea of Ranger, that's one I haven't mentioned much so far, but Rangers are actually a very strong choice. They give you a lot of the same things that a fighter would give you, namely a fighting style, extra attacks and whatnot. They give you the D10 hit points. You're not going to get the bonus action heal the fighter gets, but you will have spells, and things like Pass Without Trace and Hunter's Mark are both pretty good. So there's a lot to offer from Ranger too. But Ranger is also a half spellcaster, which can be very nice if you're combining it with a full caster, because now those half caster levels are still going to contribute to your overall spellcasting. And unlike, say, a paladin, where you're probably just going to be using those for smites, well, you will be because you're a paladin, let's face it, you're just going to smite. That's just all there is to it. But a ranger, you might actually want to cast stuff. And unlike, say, a druid, who might not fit very well with more arcane casters because you need a lot of wisdom and you need a lot of charisma generally, or intelligence, most of the good ranger spells, at least the low level ones, don't require you to have a lot of wisdom at all. Hunter's Mark doesn't really matter. Pass Without Trace doesn't really matter. A lot of your conjure woodland beings and animals and stuff don't really matter what your wisdom is, which means you could have minimum wisdom, like say 13 or 14, just to multi-class in or out of class, and then you could still combine that with a lot of other caster levels from something else. And you can pick up second attack from the ranger. I think especially that archers do quite well with this kind of idea because you can take the fighting style from the ranger class, but melee characters are okay too. You can take the 2-weapon fighting style, and you have access to things like, say, Colossus Slayer or Colossus and Giant Slayer, whichever they are. The one gives you a reaction, the other one just flat damage boost. Either way, it's a nice way to be able to boost your damage. Hunters and Gloomstalkers especially offer a lot with only a 3-level investment. It's pretty good. And if you have second attack from somewhere else, that's even better. So that's basically what I had for the most part. Be aware of cut-offs and caps. Obviously, if you're going to take 4 levels of fighter and you don't have extra attack, you might want to just take 5 to get the extra attack. Feats can be very powerful as well, so maybe taking 6 might not be a bad idea if you can fit it in. I'd like to just quickly review, I guess, and talk over the main 3 reasons to multi-class, that being to become better at something you're already good at, to become good at something you're very bad at, or just to gain versatility, in other words, to be able to do stuff you normally couldn't do. And of course, the things to look out for: dead levels, way too many attributes and spreading yourself too thin. Be aware of the trade-offs, that you're going to not be able to have everything all the time. You're going to have to give stuff up in order to get something else. and synergy between different classes. And most of all, like I said before, pre-plan out the character. A lot of the problems that I've mentioned can be avoided if you just take an extra 15 minutes to look at how this ability works in combination with this ability. And if it doesn't fit, then that's okay. Maybe you can rework it. And maybe there's a different way to do things. I mentioned earlier about a fighter who decides to go Paladin, and that first Paladin level is essentially dead. But if you went Paladin first and then just added in fighters, say you wanted 2 levels just for Action Surge, or maybe even a 3rd level for Champion, so you could have double the chance of critting on smites. Starting Paladin is going to be the way better choice, because first level fighter isn't quite as bad as first level Paladin. Now you're still getting another fighting style, which will combine with your Paladin one, as long as you don't take the same style twice. You're getting the self-heal from Second Wind. At level 2, you're getting Action Surge, and at level 3, you're getting your Archetype. And because you're going mostly Paladin, you're still going to have a fair number of Paladin spell slots. Things like Cleric are a great investment for a 1-level dip, because you get to choose your domain right at level 1. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Warlock, but it's up there. In general, I just kind of want to wrap the video up here, but I'd like to say that if you have your own ideas on classes you'd like to try, or classes that you maybe have played, please leave those comments in the comments section. If there's a specific build you'd like me to go over, leave a comment in the comments section. Because future videos, I will be taking different multi-class build ideas and just making videos dedicated just to that build. And then we can go over things in a lot more detail. This is more of a general like do's and don'ts, or tips and tricks, whatever you want to call it. And we'll get more specific with later videos. Feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all that kind of stuff. But mostly, I'd like to hear from you. Leave your comments on your own build ideas or things you'd like to see me do in the future. And I'll see you next time in the dungeon. Bye.